Right, this is a brief road test, and I'm in today a 1.6 Honda Cr X ESI, rare beast indeed. This particular car is registered R963SRJ and came to us with a wonderfully low mileage of 47,530 miles as now recorded after we've had a little bit of fun in the car. The car's had just two owners from new. The first one actually, a private chap who had the car for 17 years and bought it from Savoy Honda. And the car is fabulous. It's in wonderful, wonderful condition. Really goes, you take a step back in time in these cars, but what's wonderful about it is it still feels incredibly modern. So for a modern classic, it's not something that needs to be tucked away and used occasionally because it's fragile. These are pretty much bomb-proof little cars, and it's just got bags of character to it as well. What I try and do before I go on about the car in sort of more detail is just go kind of through the major mechanicals of the vehicle to see if there's anything I can pick up on the road test. But basically, starting the engine, first turn of the key, we're looking at the single cam 1.6 VTEC engine producing roughly 126 horsepower or so. There's no warning lights on the car. Engine pulls exactly as it's intended to, as they always did. It's a nice sweet revving engine, but it's got a kind of a gravelly note when you get towards the red line, which is really kind of addictive. You really want to sort of push the engine. Originally the CRXs came with two options. One was the all singing all dancing twin cam 160 horsepower car, and then Honda realised that the market was fairly limited for them and restricted it then to the single cam version. But in all honesty, it's still a fabulous unit. Being a 97 car, R registered, this means it's really in its last year of production, so it really is a very, very desirable car. To see one of these on the very last plates with such a low and such genuine mileage, and all importantly on this one, completely unmodified, and it's a full UK specification car, so there's it's not an imported vehicle, and again that adds huge value to these things when you come to sell them. There's been a lot of them messed around with, lowered, big alloys, bewinged, all sorts of stuff, but this one really is fabulous. Engine itself, it's very, very sweet revving. All the horsepower still seems to be there. The engine runs through clutch into gearbox. Clutch is utterly smooth in operation. It just shows just how beautifully engineered these cars are. You jump in some cars of this vintage and they do feel genuinely old, but everything about this car screams engineering. It's just beautifully done, from things like the way the engine operates through to the actuation of the clutch, which is smoothness itself, bites beautifully, exactly the right bite point on the car. There's no squeaks or the clutch doesn't go up in increments like they do on some of the notably French cars where they've got cables running from one side to the other. And then into this wonderfully slick 5-speed gearbox. It's an absolute joy to use. The change itself has lost none of its precision from when it was new. It really is a very, very sweet gear change. Gear lever itself, sort of leather bound gear knob, again all completely original, just sits in your hand perfectly. It really does ask you to wrap your hand around it, pop your thumb on top and drop it back and go for it. It's just a brilliant gear change. As kind of only Honda seem to be able to do, and possibly Mazda MX-5 would be a similar sort of thing. But it's really nicely done. Also, whilst driving the car, really obvious straight away that you're driving a car that's sort of built very, very, very well indeed. When you go over the bumps, you're not greeted by loads of creaks and grumbles and whistles and all sorts of horrendous noises. It's wind tight, it's watertight. It just doesn't have that feel of a convertible when you're driving along with the roof up. It's got an absolute solidity to it, and refinement. Occasionally when you go over kind of a deeper pothole, you might get the very occasional little murmur, but compared to virtually any car of this age and vintage, it's absolutely minuscule. It really is. Also, driving the car, track's absolutely bullet straight. Steering is very, very precise indeed. And what's lovely about it, it's just got such a fantastic chassis. Incredibly smooth riding, much more so than most modern cars. It absorbs the little imperfections on the road. You could drive this day after day after day and be utterly comfortable. But it's also got a really sweet chassis. You can push the car. It's very neutral. It doesn't pile on loads of understeer. It's got a real chuckability to it. And it's not frighteningly high limits either. So again, you get a lot of modern cars with huge, like 245 tyres and goodness knows what else, and they grip the road like limpets. But unfortunately, they've also, you've got to drive unbelievably dangerously to sort of get anywhere close to the limits of the vehicle and any sense of enjoyment. Whereas this, the limits are that much lower, but it's just all the more accessible and all the more fun for it. As a day-to-day car or weekend car, I could hardly think of a better place to sort of to sit and to drive. Driving position of the car is absolutely first class. I mean, I've always maintained to a lot of my friends that I think the most natural driving position of any car I've ever driven is one of these. I had one many years ago when I used to work at the Honda dealer, and it was my company car, and you just sit, perfect steering wheel height, beautifully done binnacle directly in front of you, very typical Honda of its vintage, very reminiscent of kind of motorbike style, but very high quality gauges there, all working absolutely perfectly, of course. But everything's to hand. It's just got a beautiful sense of ergonomics about it, where even the buttons on the door card here are angled at the perfect angle towards you, whereas most modern cars, they're flat. I mean, that's not a horrendous thing, but it just shows the attention to detail they put into these particular cars. But it all just feels exactly like it did when I used to sell these brand new. It's just got that, it's impossible to find a kind of a weak spot in the drive of the car at all. It really is. Clearly, with so few made, and there's still plenty around, which is a testament to just how well made they are, of course. But there's very, very, very few that are kind of unmolested, haven't been sort of tinkered with or messed around with in some way. So to find a really genuine car is, a real treat. And they are so much nicer than the ones that we modified to drive. But it's also a sign of ownership, which is good. But when it comes to investing your money, because it is an investment, because the classic car market continues in the way it has been doing, used car prices for classics are shooting up for desirable items like this. And I can see this car gaining substantial amounts of money over the next decade or so. And obviously, kept in good condition, the car will just keep going and going and going. Also, just coming back to the car again itself, brake pedal on the car, rock solid. Brakes have got a lovely firm pedal to them. There's no rumbles, there's no pulsing or vibration through the brake pedal at all, suggesting that obviously everything's in good order underneath there as well. What the videos don't do or can't do is really feedback to you exactly what I'm feeling, which is why we do it. But obviously, anyone who's seriously interested in buying the car, be welcome to have a drive just to confirm their purchase. But really speaking, it's I cannot fault this thing at all. What I'll do in a second, I'll just find a sort of more slightly windier road just to sort of push the car a little bit further and sort of feedback anything I can feel back through the chassis at that point. we do now is just swing round. And then head back up and find a sort of little, slightly narrower country lane, maybe to have a little bit more fun in keeping with the way the car is intended to be driven. Does pick up its pace beautifully. It's just, you know, it's an engine that in the modern world are kind of sterile, small capacity turbocharged engines. It's just such a nice thing to get back into a car with a little bit of character, a little bit of soul. And to think that years ago, you know, Honda were, you know, always admired for their engineering, but kind of sneered at by the established manufacturers. You know, very much they've had the last laugh, because, you know, a lot of kind of mainstream European cars are now quite rightly ridiculed for, you know, the poor build quality, lousy reliability and durability, you know, utter lack of it. Here we are driving a car that's just came up to 20 years old, which in reality, if most manufacturers put it into production now, they'll be chuffed to bits with it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful car to drive. It doesn't intimidate in any way. You've got really good visibility. You know, with the roof down, it's lovely to sit in here. You've got very effective heating in there. Obviously, the rear window being electric, you can put that up and down. It's very clever indeed. So you can control the amount of air that flows through the car. Obviously, for test drive purposes, I won't have the roof down, so it'd be too noisy to do it. Pedals are beautifully set out for heel and towing as well. Very easy to do, just rock your foot across and you're there on the pedal. The throttle pedal's just so nicely engineered again that again it's not sticky or annoying, and it makes, you know, heel and towing something you want to do rather than something you kind of fear. That just flows the corners absolutely beautifully. It really does. Little body roll, so controlled. The damping is just so nicely done. It doesn't jar. You know, whether it be sort of quicker corners, slower corners, it's just, you know, it takes everything you throw at it, and on awful little ridges like this, it glides over the bumps. It's such a good car. You know, in all honesty, you know, even Honda these days, you know, they don't put double wishbones on all their cars, which was their great claim at the time. Fully independent suspension all round, and you know, this is the benefit of it. But anyway, I've harped on enough. It's you know, it really is a wonderful, wonderful car. Both Tony and myself, very enthusiastic Honda people. I've got a collection of classic Hondas myself, which I absolutely love. We both worked at the Honda main dealer, so this isn't just business. This is genuinely a passion to us. So if you've got any questions about the car, please do, you know, give us a call. It'd be warm and friendly with you, and you'll be delighted to be able to have a conversation about this particular car.